Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. Cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just the perfect day. It's just the perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Eggs. This week's special guest is Greg Hickman. Greg is the founder and CEO of AltAgency. Over the last 4 years, Greg and his team have transformed AltAgency from an automation consultancy serving many well-known entrepreneurs and growth experts into one of the top coaching and training companies for agencies looking to grow and scale by packaging their expertise, installing systems for growth, and leveraging automation to save time. Here to talk about serving more people while working the same amount, the fastest way to grow your business to 7 figures, growing capacity, productization, mindset shifts, and so much more. Join me in welcoming to the show, Greg Hickman. How you doing, Greg?
I am great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thrilled to have you. I will just make one quick note. People will notice that it's just Greg and I today. Mike is at the tail end of a experience in Nome, Alaska, and unable to call in today. So we're doing the show Mike free. So everybody give him some crap on social media, and and outside of that, we'll proceed with our conversation. So anyway, so Greg, let's talk a little bit just about who you are, where you come from, what you do, and basically the problem that you're trying to overcome with the work you're doing.
Yeah. So, long story short, come from agency world, big brand, and also boutique size agencies, and started my own, failed, and then kind of pivoted into what kind of led me on the more recent journey, which was really falling in love with marketing automation. And we built like a small boutique agency serving online entrepreneurs that were selling courses, coaching, masterminds. A lot of authors, speakers, coaches, podcasters were our clientele. And we grew that really, really quickly, and to the point where I didn't want to keep hiring more people. And I saw the writing on the wall of, well, I'm just going to be building what I've escaped from these traditional agencies that I had been in. And so I knew I needed to do something different. And I realized that what we were doing, we were able to kind of codify and deliver in more of a one-to-many format, in something that's, a little bit more leveraged, but still high touch. And that's really like the beginning of the pivot. And that was 2017, where we kind of started this transition from a done-for-you services agency into really kind of a training and coaching business. And we haven't really looked back, and we got a lot of people asking us how we were doing it, how we were able to accomplish that. And that's really has become the mission, is to help other agency owners, consultants, freelancers that were in that same position as me, that, they came from this world, they love serving, but they're now trapped. They're trapped in the day-to-day fulfillment. They can't really kind of break free of being like the bottleneck in the business. And because of that, they kind of designed a job instead of, the freedom that they were looking for when, becoming an entrepreneur in the first place. So I'm on a mission to help those folks kind of get back their life and have a business that actually serves them and not the other way around.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's funny because so much of what you're saying really resonates with me. Our little agency is kind of a boutique agency, sort of we've fallen into sort of the same agency trap as many do, sort of this idea that we, are all things to all people. And basically it became, or it has sort of always been kind of a natural extension of just my freelance career. Right. And so to your point about this idea that you've built a job, ultimately that's what I did 20 years ago. I built a job for myself because I'd been laid off from work and needed to build a job. And so I did that. It's worked really well. And we've had various stages of ebbs and flows, good and bad. I think you talk a lot about sort of the feast famine cycle. And I think that would be interesting to talk about a little bit. But I think, for people like me, even though we do really well and we do work for these huge companies and stuff like that, I find myself, especially in times of famine, where I'm doing more and more of the work. And I don't know how much it is just an age thing, but, my background is in art direction, creative direction. And so I've always been the hands-on designer guy. I've always been the worker bee. And I found that the older I get, the less I want to do that. And the more I'm interested in some of this systemization. However, it's really difficult, at least in our experience, as we've tried to transition our agency from what people know to something totally new or different. We've struggled quite a bit in finding sort of a good process for making that shift, and I don't know how much of it's just caught up in mindset, caught up in me doing things the way I've always done them. Or, how much is actually, that it's actually that difficult to make the transition. So I wondered if maybe we could explore that a little bit and sort of talk a little bit about, the moment that came in your life where you decided, okay, it's time. And what sort of happened there? I mean, obviously you had a business that was already thriving, but yet you still decided, I'm going to roll the dice on this and we're going to pivot. Yeah.
So we were growing quickly. At our peak, we were, I want to say, like 12 people, somewhere in the 8 to 12, like full-time, partial full-time, and a couple contractors. And I think we were like averaging like anywhere from like 55 to 65K a month in revenue, which is like, we were growing. We had better months, but we kind of seemed to like always fall back to like, that's the number that we just kept falling back to. And, in hindsight, there's probably a lot of things that I could have done to change that. But in that moment, in that kind of period of the business, when it was like, all right, we have this demand that's coming in from people that want to work with us, but we don't have the capacity. And it kind of became that catch-22 of, well, I now need to hire one more person that can now serve these 8 to 10 more new clients or whatever the number was. But I don't have those 8 to 10 new clients. I have 1 new client or 2 new clients, and that's not going to cover the expense of the 1 new person. And when I started looking at that, I hit the point where it just said, well, okay, if I want to hit these bigger goals that I have following the same trajectory, like my team's going to look like this. And I just didn't want that. And I came from agencies that are part of Omnicom, like big 100 multiple headquarters. Then I've been in like small shops, and I don't know, something about that style of business, like I just didn't want to go back to. And so I had to start looking at things a little bit differently. I was at a conference, and I forget which one, to be honest, but Clay Collins was speaking, the founder of Lead Pages, former CEO of Lead Pages, which is just a landing page tool. And he said the fastest way for any business to grow to 7 figures is to focus on the 5 whys, and to focus on one avatar, giving them one solution, using one conversion method, using one traffic source, and do all of those things for 1 year. And I said, okay, well, I have the one avatar, but we were selling them just about everything. And we had tons of solutions, and we sold tons of different services. It was custom every time. And so I said, okay, well, how do we start looking at like simplifying what it is we sold? So I just basically went back to work after hearing him say that, and we just applied it. I said, I'm only going to utilize Facebook, both paid and organically. I'm not going to focus on being anywhere else. We are going to package up our solutions into one offer, and I'm only going to sell that offer moving forward. And it's to the one type of person that we were serving. And so I did that. And within 11 months, we hit our 7-figure run rate. more profitable than ever, and happy and fun. And like we did it with like 3-4 people instead of 12. And so that was sort of like the catalyst for me of like, we were making that transition. And those 11 months for us was a little bit of balance. You know, we already had a bunch of clients that we were working with, so we couldn't just fire them all. Like we needed some of the revenue. But we needed to start focusing on bringing in new clients and kind of shifting where the revenue was coming from, so that the revenue that was coming in was from the new way of doing business, not the old way of doing business. And over that time, we kind of did a balancing act of, you know, phasing out the old and bringing in the new. And for us, it took us about 11 months. We could have done it faster if we'd had less clients, or we just were ballsy enough to fire them. But we didn't, and I don't recommend that most people do that. So that took us a little time, but that was, you know, I just didn't want to go back to that traditional style of agency, because it really, like, we woke up feeling more like employees than we had our own business. I didn't have much money to show for it at the end of the day. I was working my butt off evenings, weekends, on vacations. My wife, at the time, my girlfriend, then fiance, then wife, like, was not happy about it. And I was just burnt out. And, you know, we'd wake up stressed all the time as a team, you know, fire drills all the time. And again, there's a lot of things that we could have done different that would have minimized that. But it really just reminded me of all the stuff I dealt with in all of my, you know, years of being in different agencies. And that wasn't the path that I wanted. And so I saw all of these other people that were building like these online businesses, you know, information businesses, training businesses, coaching, consulting, whatever. And I knew that we could make that pivot with the expertise that we had. And that was really just the start of it.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about then? So, I mean, you did this, you followed Clay Collins' model, this idea of doing that. How much of, I guess, and maybe this is just like kind of a personality question, but how much of making that pivot was your own discipline and sort of your own ability to do that versus sort of risk aversion, right? So, I mean, some people may have just pulled off the Band-Aid and gone for it, but you sort of were able to sort of make this work where you're doing one kind of business and then doing the other kind of business at the same time, sort of phasing one in and phasing out. Like, I mean, in general, was this a feat of will? Like, was it that you were so disciplined that you were able to crack this nut, or were there stumbles along the way?
Oh, I mean, falling all over myself. Like, I can't, like, I mean, it took 11 months. It was hard. A lot of really hard conversations. The biggest thing for me was, that I spent, and when I look back on it, and this is what we kind of teach a lot of our clients, because I see them doing the same thing. We're so afraid to lose revenue, the revenue that we had, that we weren't focusing enough on the new direction. And I spent easily 4 to 6 months trying to reconfigure the plans that we had with our existing clients so that we could become more profitable and make it better. But I spent too much time focusing on the old instead of the new. And that is what primarily delayed the transition. And I had hired a coach somewhere within this window of time, and I was kind of expressing what was going on. And we kind of really broke it out onto a spreadsheet. And I wasn't even really sure how profitable each client was. So I went through like a 30 to 60 day experience where we were me and the team like got really good at tracking our time across all these clients. And lo and behold, we find out that, you know, 5 or 6 of them equal 80% of our bandwidth. And when you kind of equate our total time spent on them, we were actually losing money on all 6, like 5 or 6 of them. And so like we were losing money on most of like some of our key business, yet they were also taking up 80% of our bandwidth. And so like, once I kind of saw those numbers, I just realized like, there's no plan I'm going to make at this point for these guys where it doesn't feel like I'm just pulling the rug out from underneath their feet. It's like, there's no win-win here. Like, I can't be like, hey, keep paying me the same, but you get half the work. Cause like we were way over delivering, and like that was the expectation that they got it when we talked about it. But when we talked about where we would transition to, it just didn't make sense to continue on. And so once I saw the numbers, I was like, oh, like this is why like we have no capacity. This is why this isn't working. And the coach that I had at the time, and actually kind of one interesting element of this was one of my clients was a coach, and had previously coached me and made a comment. He's like, I'm telling you this as a coach, not as like one of your clients. He's like, because what I'm about to tell you will suck for me as a client. He's like, you can't keep growing your business this way. Like if you want true freedom, scalability, leverage, like you need to get out of the done for you services. And he's like, I know that means I'm going to need to find someone new. He's like, hopefully like when you decide to do this, you'll help us find that person. And we did. Like he was the client that we took like 6 months to transition out of, and we had a couple of those like 3 to 6 months transition plans. And that's kind of what it took. So, it was definitely hard. Still, there was a lot of overworking because you're kind of running these two different models, just because I didn't want to burn any bridges. Sure. But, yeah, I mean, by no means would I say it was pretty, but it was like what needed to be done. It could have been done faster if I had the data in front of me. And I would say, I would say there was a lack of discipline until I saw the numbers, and then I just zoned in.
No, I think that's good to hear. And I think I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it's good to understand that, this isn't as easy as they say, I mean, just because, we prefaced our 5 1s with the idea that, this is the fastest way to 7 figures. Yeah. So it kind of makes it sound simple, or makes it sound straightforward. Right. So I think it's good to sort of hear about the ups and downs.
Focusing on those things for a year is like what everyone gets hung up on. And it's funny because I get it all the time. Because so many of the clients that we work with, they serve multiple verticals, multiple niches, avatars, and they're so hung up on the fact that if they only were to serve one of them, they can't grow. Like their business won't survive if they only serve that one type of person. When it's like, that is the furthest thing from the truth. In 99.9% of cases, like you're never niched down like that far, at least the people that we deal with. And it's like they just assume that by offering less or by serving fewer types of people that they won't be able to grow. But like they're not growing to where they want to be, where they're at right now either. And it's like they're just looking so far off into the future that like they haven't like rolled it back to actual specifics. And when you do that, like almost everyone's goals are way achievable by serving less types of people and selling less things. Hands down.
Yeah,
I think
that's so true. And there is for sure that paradigm, especially among like creative thinkers, but I imagine you've seen definitely it in other businesses.
We have a handful of clients now that are like the web designers, the, motion graphics and brand strategists. And you guys are definitely the most difficult to deal with, because a lot of what the transition took for us was being able to sell things that were unpolished. And like without a sales page or without a website, and without a logo and all of these things that like inherently is like what a lot of our clients actually do. It sort of is it's like a contradiction to like what they believe. And it's like, all right, well, if you want to move fast, you actually need to not have it perfect in version 1. I know you're a designer and I know you want to make things look nice, but you can spend a lot of time making it look nice and it still not work. So like operating kind of in that gray area, that unpolished, and be okay with it, knowing that it's temporary, is super pivotal in making this transition. And I find the creatives are the ones that struggle with that the most.
Well, I think it makes sense, right? I mean, for most creative people, I mean, they're basically, somewhat visionary, and I don't want to discount all other business people either, because everybody's kind of creative in their own way, right? I mean, so right. But the way that a creative talent is sort of trained is that basically they have to be somewhat visionary. So they're already looking down the road. What does this look like in a campaign? What does this look like when it finally hits the streets, whatever? And so we're already thinking 3 or 4 steps down the road. And then, and almost never looking at today, and is it effective, but is it pretty, or does it do the,
Right.
does it do the job, or does it please the client? And sometimes just working in that mode where you're just pleasing client, for example, client may not know their head from their elbow either.
Yeah.
It's like, so, I mean, you're busy
They
pleasing
often
somebody who's wrong, so it's an interesting thing. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about was, first of all, so as you're transitioning to this new type of business, obviously you had to find a new kind of client. You said you were able to sort of transition some of your people, but the work you were doing went from, automated marketing to coaching and training. And so I imagine that your audience shifted a little bit, but I wondered if you could sort of couch that conversation, this idea of finding new clients, into a conversation about niching down and sort of finding our product, I guess. Because I think, one of the things in your case, you found coaching as your product, right? I think for other agency owners, maybe it's as simple as niching down to just, I'm the logo guy, or whatever.
And we preach what we call the hybrid. I don't think it's an original term, but, and it's delivering the solution using a combination of delivery modalities. It can be a little bit of done for you, a little bit of training, a little bit of coaching and consulting. I think you can string those together to create a really great delivery experience that is less hands-on, as it was in the beginning, less custom. And for us, it was a lot of like, all of this kind of stems back to like the evolution of like specializing in something. You mentioned the example of becoming like a logo designer. I'll kind of high level give you like the trajectory, because yes, it kind of was a different client over time, but it didn't have to be. It just kind of played out that way. So, our clients were, when we were doing everything for people, it was like the online course creator, author, speaker, podcaster, coach. So oftentimes we were dealing with the owner, the influencer, that personality. And we would, have a couple conversations, and we'd go build them a webinar funnel, or, build out some automation that they asked for. And, we'd get the directive, and we'd go build and review. And what we realized is like, we're building the same thing over and over again. Like the only thing that's different is the content that's inside of it. Like, it's the same funnel, same number of pages. So internally, we like templatize a lot of things so that we weren't building things from scratch. Like, that allowed us to turn projects around a whole lot faster. Then we realized like the 80-20 of the things we were building, like there was only a couple of them. So like we stopped offering to build everything but these 3 things. And then we packaged those as standalone projects versus just retainers. Because in the beginning, we sold everything into a retainer, which is what led to all of these custom things and like all these random projects. So we went from selling directly into a retainer to packaging up these 3 things that we found ourselves doing the most, having them be their one-off project. And only after we delivered that would we potentially invite someone into being in a retainer. So like simplifying and specializing kind of is where we're at this stage. Then we realized, well, actually, we were never the ones writing the copy. We were never the ones designing the pages. We were really the ones connecting all of the things with automation and like making sure it all worked. So we realized that we didn't need to wait for the client to like finish designing it for it to be connected. So like we did all of our part and like wiped our hands, and like, you can take as long as you want to put the email copy in there. Like, that's where you put it. I don't need to copy and paste that there. Here's a video showing you how to copy and paste it. Like, our work here is done. And so like, that was like the beginning of, oh, well, we can train them how to do certain things that eliminate the amount of back and forth that takes a project from 7 days to, 3 months, because we're just waiting on the client. Mm-hmm. And so we started weaving in different trainings and boundaries that allowed us to give them certain things and they finish it, because most of our work was actually done. And we were doing that one-on-one. And then I realized, well, a lot of the clients come to us, they want the exact same thing. So like, if we're just giving it to them and like they finish it off, why can't I have multiple people watching these videos at the same time? And like, that's where we started testing like the whole one-to-many thing. we were still working with our ideal client of like author, speaker, coach. We went multiple rounds of serving that type of client in that capacity. What made me switch to serving agencies was more for myself than I think it was like the business. We could have continued our business doing it that way. The thing for me was I realized that a big piece of growing the business was attracting new clients, and like not just from referrals. Like word of mouth and referrals were great, but like to scale this thing to where we needed to get to, like we need to be able to attract people and bring people in like on demand, which means I needed to be some sort of like, I needed to be able to tell a lot of stories about our clients. And I kind of like, I wasn't a course creator. I was a service provider. I was the agency. I was working with them. So there's only so many stories that I had that I could like weave into my marketing. So it became for me personally really hard to like attract more of them because I wasn't them and I didn't have more stories that they would be like, oh, he gets me. But when I talked about my journey as a service provider, like instantaneously tons of those people would like come right to us. And I was like, well, maybe I should just be helping those people systematize and automate their business instead of these course creators. And so we did a cohort of service providers selling the exact same thing, but to agency owners. And it like took off. And I was like, and I had fun, and it was more fun, and it was easier. And like I could relate to every single person I was serving because I've lived that life. And that's when I was like, I need to serve these people because I am them. And that's kind of, it just felt more right for me. I see clients that don't do it that way. And it doesn't have to be that way. And again, we were scaling the other audience. It just, for me, felt easier to scale this one.
Yeah. Well, and I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that this is, a steady problem or constant problem that I'm seeing among, especially small boutique agencies or even freelance people, is this idea of how do we draw new clients? How do we bring people in, right? Because like so much of it seems to be done by sort of in-person relationships and things like that. I don't think most people lean towards automated marketing services, or working through like Facebook or something, for example.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, is that how you would recommend, I mean, for maybe a small business or somebody who's looking to try and bring on new clients, is working through a platform like Facebook or something, as one of our 5 ones? Is that?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be Facebook. I mean, a lot of days for service providers, like LinkedIn is really starting to explode, I think, in that realm. What I think everyone needs to do is start to publish. Like really this notion of like become your own media company. Gary Vaynerchuk made this really popular. But if you want people coming to you, you need to show up as an expert and a leader. And your small subset of clients knowing that you're good at what you do is not going to ever be enough for you to scale. Like if you're like serving 3 to 5 clients, like you'll never have enough people coming knocking on your door unless your 3 to 5 clients have massive audiences. And so you need to do something to create an audience and create some level of attraction, which means you need to put yourself out there. You need to create content. You need to publish videos. You need to do a podcast like this so that you can get eyeballs and get into people's ears and say things that make them say, oh, wow, he or she gets me, or, oh, wow, he can help me. Like I should go reach out, or, oh, he just told me how he can help. Like, let me go reach out. Like that's like this whole notion of like becoming the leader in your marketplace, becoming an expert and demonstrating that through leadership, AKA blogging, posting, voicing your opinion, having a stance and opinion on something in your market is going to attract people.
And do you have any thoughts on that?
That needs to become consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you have any thoughts? So like, I know a few different people who I've sort of advised in these same directions, which are, produce content, be writing steadily, try and produce videos when you can, maybe start a podcast, that sort of thing, but they, I guess, sort of shout to nowhere for a really long time. Like it seems like things just never really turn around, and I mean, have you, or at least in your experience, is there maybe there's not like a clear threshold when enough is enough, but do you have any kind of indicator or like, you're doing it wrong if you're not seeing movement by X, that kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't have an answer to that from like a length of time, but usually it's when these people are trying to like creating content for content's sake. Like I don't recommend publishing for no reason, or publishing about anything. And this is where the whole simplifying your business and specializing your business comes in. Like every time I release a video, like I'm speaking to a specific person that is within 90 days of buying from me. That can't be speaking to everyone. Like I'm speaking to a specific person. Every time I open my mouth, every time I write a word, it is aligned with where a potential buyer is that is my ideal prospect. And so if you serve chiropractors, universities, hospitality, like that is, and you're just out there creating content, it's going to be really difficult because it's going to feel like you're not speaking to anyone specifically. And so I think you have to back to who do you serve? What is the problem that they have? And everything you talk about and do should be about helping that person. That's when your content becomes potent. And that's when people hear it and will start to come. Will they come instantaneously? I think that depends. I mean, we have a client, Seth, who builds websites, brand designer, all that stuff. And he came to us and he like served everybody. And we helped him kind of narrow down how to look at his client. And what was preventing him from creating content and publishing, like I suggested, was he didn't know what he was publishing about or like what to say. He just never started. And once he went through our process, which really helps people map out what it is they do and like map it into a proprietary process that they can then brand, you have something to talk about. And he started posting on LinkedIn and like watched his like view counts, like more than triple into like the thousands, and conversations get started off of that. Sales calls started coming in where they're like, I saw your content, like really loved what you were saying over there, in a matter of weeks. And I mean, he was posting once or twice a week. It was good content. It was aligned with speaking to his specific person. So like all of those things come into play. But if you do it right, you can be having conversations relatively quickly. To scale it up, it's going to come around like, well, how do you kind of make this more of a repeatable process? Like, oh, you release one episode a week or 2 podcasts a week, or like, how do you systematize it internally for yourself so that you don't miss a day and you stay consistent? But once you start doing that, the amplifying of that process using things like paid media can really accelerate it. And I don't think it's like either or, organic or paid. It's like, it's a combination of both. And the paid and organic should have a specific intent. Like, what am I telling these people to do? What's the call to action at the end? Is it to comment below? Is it to answer a question? Is it to register for a webinar? Is it to download my PDF? So like, there has to be some game plan to like bring them into my world, not just create more noise. My noise needs to capture something, like not just their attention, their email address, their phone number, their link, their Facebook profile, their LinkedIn profile, so that I can have a conversation with them and control the flow of that conversation, right? If someone opts into my webinar, I'm pre-framing them on how I can help. And then they get follow-up suggesting that we hop on a call, and like a sales funnel. Like you have to build some of these vehicles out to bring people to you, and much of which can be automated and at least systematized.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. And I think it does go back to this concept of niching, because I think, we talked about it kind of, or touched on it a little bit a moment ago, but this idea of sort of a mindset shift, right? That sort of creative people see themselves in a certain way, right? So they see themselves as a freelancer, and I shouldn't even say creative people, business people who are tradesmen, for example, people who have started a business maybe based on the job that they do.
Technician.
Maybe you've become a great plumber or whatever. I heard in an interview you did something about the book Built to Sell, which I just love, by the way.
Yeah.
And so, but it's sort of that idea, right? So as the technician, you're the person who's actually, laying your hands on every little project, when in reality, you should be backing it out and making it a little bit more systematized.
Absolutely.
And so maybe we could talk a little bit then about, if this is the case, if we understand that most people have trouble I guess, seeing themselves in the right light. Do you have any tips or ideas on how people start to make that transition into shifting their mindset so they can start to, I guess, allow themselves to see themselves in a different way? You know, I can give one sort of anecdotal example. This year, semi-recently, well, actually starting in November last year, but in January this year, we made it official. We launched a remote work consultancy. And so we started this business, and it's called Team Made Apart. And basically we started doing this work towards trying to help facilitate better relationships between remote workers and the people who hire them. So how do we make that a better life? And so in March, we launched the podcast, we launched the website, and then 2 weeks later, the world went fully remote. And you know, for fear or because of my own sort of limitations being sort of imposed by my own mindset, I didn't feel good rolling out a service offering right then. I felt like, you know, all of a sudden there's going to be a lot of people scared, a lot of people in trouble, and I didn't feel good offering something for money. Right. And so what we ended up doing was we rolled out a bunch of resources for free. You know, here's a bunch of places to go, software to use, things like that, if you're now working remotely and you need help getting started. So now, you know, 4 or 5 months later, you know, whatever this new normal is, just kind of is where we are now. And now it's becoming important that we start to develop a product. We actually have to figure out the business plan, right? This thing sort of started out as a philanthropic venture and has now, you know, got to pay the bills. And actually I'm having such fun with it. I'd like to maybe transition one day out of the agency world and make this career pivot, right?
Yeah.
But in my head, I'm 40 years old. I've always been the designer. I've always been this guy. I've always done the agency thing. And so even to wrap myself around this idea of thought leader in the remote work space, for example, has been a real challenge. And, you know, the business itself, Team Made Apart, was sort of built on an article I'd written. I started doing a lot of writing, and there was a phrase in there, this idea of being a team made apart. And that's where it was sort of born from. And so since then, we've been continually making content. I do this podcast, but I also do a Team Made Apart show. And more recently, we've been doing a special introspective on mental health issues as they pertain to remote workers. And so we've been doing the mental health show. We've been doing all this stuff. But, you know, we're a really young business, but we're not getting some of the traction that I would like, right? We're just not getting out to the ears that need to find us.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of that mindset shift. How do we turn these corners when we're sort of known for one thing, even if it's kind of only to ourselves, right? I mean, a lot of times we assume people see us in a way, but really it's just us. You know, I mean, do you have any thoughts about mindset shift?
Yeah, a lot. And I'm not a therapist, but one example for me, I mean, before I even got into all the automation stuff, I mean, my decades of experience in agency world were all tied to mobile marketing, text message marketing, mobile apps. You know, like I was involved in mobile marketing before the iPhone came out. Like, so like my whole career in every agency I was really at outside of my first agency was all about mobile. And I was the mobile guy. Like when I transitioned into trying to figure out the online business game, I was trying to create a course helping people doing mobile. My first agency was like mobile messaging for independent retail, which fizzled out. It was really hard. And in all of that, I stumbled upon the automation stuff that I was using for myself primarily. And I had been hitting my head against the wall for a really long time. And I had to ask myself the question, like, what's more important, being the mobile guy or having a successful business that lets me live the life that I want? And like, when I like started looking at it like that, it's like, what's more important, this title that means absolutely nothing and makes me no money, or building something that is of substance that can grow beyond me? And it's like, at that point, it was like, okay, like why have I, like, I need to get over this thing because I can reinvent myself. And I've reinvented myself multiple times. So I've just like somehow just gotten really good at it. I haven't codified it yet, but really it's like, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and ask, what do you really want? Like, is it to be known as this thing that behind the scenes, you know, isn't really creating the life or the income that you need to survive, or go at something new and put yourself out there with the opportunity that it's, you know, that it can help change. And so for what I did was, because I'm very systematic, like and I think this is why I can relate with creatives of wanting everything to look nice, is I needed to see like 50 steps ahead. And I had a podcast host that I was working with at the time of doing this. And he's like, you're going to overthink this. Like, how many clients like would you need to get in the next 30 days doing this automation thing that would make you feel good enough that you would consider giving that direction even like more thought? And I was like, 3. And he's like, all right, cool. He's like, all you need to do for the next 30 days is go get 3 clients selling like automation services. He's like, don't think about a company name. Don't think about what this company is going to look like 10 years from now, like, or what you're going to be selling. He's like, go get 3 clients selling this thing. That will earn you the right to ask, should I consider a different direction? And I was like, all right, fair. And in 6 days, I had 7 clients and like making about 80% of what I was making in the other business that took me 5 years. And I was like, all right, like there's more money here. Like this was way easier to get clients than what I had been spending my time doing. Like in 7 days, I'm almost where I could have been, like almost where I'm at now. That took me 5 years. It was just right there. It was obvious. And so I said, F it, I'm going all in. And I like went down that path. And at the time the business looked way different. I mean, way different than what I even described when we started. Like in the beginning, I was trying to be like the WP Curve, if you heard of them, for like Infusionsoft, which is a horrible idea. But that's how I started. And like a bunch of people were paying me $200 a month, $300 a month, or $500 a month. And I realized like, that's not going to work. And then we kind of up leveled more into like an actual agency. So I think it's like the not overthinking it piece, kind of bringing it back to how I started, of like, how can you just experiment with something small to like give yourself the confidence that you should maybe pursue something different and that it's okay. And if you can make more money and live the life that you want doing something that's different from what you've been doing, you have to ask yourself, like, what's more important, like the fame of this other thing or the actual fortune? And for me, it was the fortune.
Sure.
And so that's how I went at it. But I think all of this stems back to, and like when you were sharing like the things you're working on, the biggest bottleneck for most of these folks is that they're just trying to do too much. You're juggling too much. Like it's like 2 different podcasts, this other thing, your current agency clients. Like I hear like, that's like minimal compared to what I hear from people. And like, when you add it all up, like you're trying to build like 7 businesses all at the same time. Like when you really break it down, it's like, and you're not good at any one of them. Like you're going to be second or third best all out of the gate because you're splitting your time. So like if you could just focus on one thing for the next 12 months, like you will grow so much faster. Like, and that comes with discipline of learning to say no to things, which is why there's a little bit of a transition. And that's why like our process helps our clients get really clear on what it is they do, how they can package it up, and the value that it actually creates in the marketplace so that they can go to market confidently. Because most of them, like their product is the word yes. It's like, hey, can you do this? Yes. Well, actually, can you also do this? Yes. It's like, there's a good chance that every yes you said that you like expressed is a different business. Like if the solution is different, you're running multiple businesses. Each client is a different business. And that's nearly impossible to systematize, nearly impossible to automate. And so all of these things that you want are impossible because of the model and the way in which you've chosen to do it. So the first thing is like, just say no to more stuff, specialize on one thing, and commit to it long enough to see it through is really what it comes down to. And that's the biggest challenge for most people, because like they don't know, if you will take anything, you're never going to say no to anything. And so you're always spread way too thin. And most of the 7-figure businesses that I know of, like, or at least when they got to 7 figures, they sell 1 to 2 things. That's it. 1 to 2. And like, that's all you need. It's all you need. And it's just the fear of not knowing where the next client is coming from, which all stems back to you will serve anybody. And so you don't know who you're looking for. You don't know how to show up in the world. You don't know how to say what you do. You don't know who to go look for, because you'll do anything for anybody. And that just leaves you in this like perpetual cycle of like not actually moving anywhere.
Yeah. No, I think that's right.
That feeds the lack of confidence. And I don't know. I mean, maybe you have money issues growing up or whatever. We all do.
Yeah. Who knows where it comes from, right?
But I think all of those things get amplified when we kind of intentionally or like unintentionally spread ourselves too thin, thinking that by doing more or accepting more types of clients that we're actually going to get ahead, when it's the actual opposite.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And, I'm a notorious taker honor of things. And I also have that sort of critical part, the designer bit, that I want everything to look great and be perfect as it comes out, right? Yeah. And so I spend a lot of time on production. I spend a lot of times doing things. And, this world that I'm living in is really conflicted, because we've got the agency, and that's basically the bread and butter and has been for a really long time. But, it's got plenty of problems. It needs to be worked through. It needs to be, fixed. But then this whole new direction, was born out of a conversation with a business coach, and I really love it. Like, it's great stuff, but I haven't yet figured out how to make money doing it. Right. So it's great that I have this interest or this passion around the subject, but I don't know yet really how to, like, what to do with it, or how to uncover what my product is, or even who my customer is really. Yeah. And I think that that's part of the struggle, right? We went right to rolling out a lot of content, podcasts, things like this. But, it's still maybe a little bit fuzzy who we're actually talking to. And so I think it makes sense to try and drill down on that. And maybe to that end, do you have any tactics or recommendations that people can use? Obviously it's part of your program. And if you'd like to talk about your program a little bit, you're welcome to. But, like, in terms of trying to identify who your customer is, I mean, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice it. But I mean, ultimately, I think you have to want to work with this person. Like, you have to enjoy being like I get some agency owners that come to us and, they're struggling to grow, and they're like working with dentists. I'm like, well, why are you working with dentists? And they're like, because someone said that there's money in working with dentists. And I was like, I think you're going to have a really difficult time breaking beyond these plateaus, because like, you don't seem to even care about the person you're serving. I think that's an inherent problem that I see a lot of service providers fall into, is like I am in love with helping agency owners. Like, I know their pain. I know their struggle, freelancer, consultant, like many of them is like the same thing. Like, I am that person. So I feel like it's really, I think it becomes really easy when you are the client. And so like, I'd ask, like, is there that for you or anyone listening? Like, can you find that? Because if you can, I think that's the ultimate catalyst. But you have to enjoy working with them. You have to be able to solve their problem. They have to have a problem, I think, worth solving, that they're willing to pay for, and that there's someone that will pay. Right? Like, those are kind of three key things. And so if you have a bunch of clients, I'd look at, like, where is most of your money coming from? Is it any one type? Look for, similarities. Is it a vertical? Are they trying to solve a particular type of problem? Is it a particular service that you seem to keep selling more of? So I'd be looking for where most of your existing revenue comes from, where you're spending most of your time with your existing clients, and on what. Because that's probably what's been getting you up to this point. I would then loop in the questions of, like, do I actually like this person, et cetera. But I think it can be as simple as that, honestly.
Yeah. But no, that makes sense. I think, just to sort of explain the freelancer's plight, so many freelancers are busy chasing the check, right? I mean, it's one thing to the next thing. And so they just kind of take whatever. They get pretty indiscriminate, a lot of them. And you do find too, as you start to step away, or you do start to specialize, you do start seeing that you can make more money for the task you're doing, but it seems so counterintuitive, right? Most of us have a hard time seeing it. And so that makes sense. And I think, to just sort of frame this or maybe try and put it in a way that might be useful for our listeners, with my Team Made Apart experiment, I don't come to remote work, for example, the way a lot of people do. A lot of people became remote workers. They work for Facebook or something, and they're, an employee, they get a regular check, all that stuff. They just happen to work remotely. I am a lifelong freelance, right? I've been, I've worked for everybody up to, the Fortune 500 and everything, but I've always done it from my home office or a co-working space or whatever, right?
Right.
And so I come to it from a different direction. So when Team Made Apart was born, the idea is exactly that. We are a teammate, but somehow we're apart, right? We're not necessarily in the fold. We're not an employee. And so, my passion for it or my interest in it is really how can people, leverage, freelance or remote work, whatever we want to call it, to improve their situation or become better at it. Right. And in my mind, or at least my perspective, is that we do that by fostering better relationships with people. Right. So we focus more on soft skills rather than, you don't have to be the best designer as long as you have a better handle on how to manage people or how to work with people, and so we focus more energy on these relationship building components than we do on like whatever kind of work they're doing. And so that's sort of our focus is relationships. And then even as it pertains to like our marketing agency, for example, or our design shop, the clients that we choose to work with are largely companies that do big money deals by handshake still, so these are largely commercial real estate companies, commercial services providers, people like that, people who still broker a deal on a handshake or a personal relationship.
Right.
And so, but that's sort of the whole thing, right? So then again, we're not focused necessarily on the work as much as we're focused on the relationship that facilitates the work.
Yeah.
And so, but even all that, and it's barely niche down, like there's still probably more niching to be done. But even with that level of focus, like we've already seen so much more movement in just sort of focusing that little bit. And it's been interesting, like with Team Made Apart, just to sort of share that experience, especially, basically birthing a company in the middle of COVID, that hyper focus on this specific, semi-specific niche, I think that there's a lot of room to tighten up still. But, even getting as niche as we have in the remote work space, or just narrowing it to remote work, has given us so much more focus that it sort of, the next step is sort of already in front of us, right? So we can kind of follow it instead of trying to invent it from whole cloth. And so I think that might be sort of the power of niching, right? Is that you understand what to do because there's a way to deal with that particular niche.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you could take your whole thing one step further by just be focused on like creatives, like, how do organizations work with creatives remotely, or, like helping kind of bridge that gap. Cause that's a gap that, like you've been doing creative work for companies remotely for a very long time. Like just that one notch down, like positions you a whole lot differently and makes you way more specific on who you're talking to. You can either be speaking to the creative that is now forced into working remotely because of the situation. That might become like a whole like way of doing business moving forward. How does the creative person now interact with the rest of the organization when they're all remotely and they can't just, have these little brainstorm meetings? You could also be, helping train organizations that are heavily reliant on their creative team, right? Like, so like, I don't like suggesting two-sided marketplaces because they're really difficult types of businesses from everyone that I know that runs them. But like there could be a two-sided marketplace there of like connecting creatives with, companies that are looking for, remote creative help. So like, again, like when you start zoning in on the type of person that you want to help, like in this case, if you were helping yourself or people like you that are the creative that is working remotely, ask yourself like, well, what was my biggest problem? And then figure out like, can you solve that? Like, how would you solve that? And that's going to start leading to some sort of solution. So the sooner anyone can narrow down on who it is they want to help or like helping, all it becomes is like getting to know that person more. If you're not them already, it's like, what keeps them up at night? Like, what is their biggest pain point? Like, where are they losing time, or what are they wasting money on, or how could I help them make more money or get more time back or be more productive, like whatever. But like when you start zoning in on that one person, you can figure out how to help them by understanding what their pain and problems are. Where are they now? Where do they want to get to? And if you have the skill set to help them, then like that's your solution. So, I mean, I think it's just like you notch down a couple more layers on this creative element of it, and then start asking, well, which side am I trying to help? What do they need right now? Or what do they need right now? What might that look like?
Yeah, it's funny that you say it that way, because the way we've positioned ourselves with Teammate Apart right now is this idea that, you know, it is our role to teach remote workers and those who hire them how to work better together, right? So inherently, it's this two-way street. It's how do we make the relationship, you know, going upward to the employer better, and how do we make the relationships coming downward to the worker bee? How do we make those better? And even more recently, with a lot of the mental health concerns that are rising up in sort of in and around remote work, there's you know, a lot more relationship with self kind of discussion, you know. So there's actually even this third thing going on. But so it's funny because we built this two-way street, and then sort of one of the things that gets me really charged up actually is helping like people who are creatives. And so when I'm talking about creatives, I mean designers, you know, artists, these kind of people in really like economically disadvantaged parts of the world, to leverage remote work as a way to elevate themselves out of an environment. Right. Yeah. So I've been coaching a kid in Africa, a kid in Bangladesh, a kid in India, you know, all these kids who are young creatives right out of college looking to try and build something, but they don't know how to do it, or how to find a job, maybe with a company in the UK or something that they could work for, maybe make European money, you know, from the, you know, sub-Saharan Africa or something. Yeah. And so it's been an interesting journey, but there's sort of that philanthropic bit too. So, but I think even just, you know, thinking about those sort of three groups, you know, it helps sort of niche us down even further. So I think that's really useful info. Yeah. I mean, like, what I'm hearing, and I could be hearing this totally wrong, but like, you have training that helps creatives become, like, call it like better remote workers. And then you have organizations that are looking for the remote creatives, and you're like a recruitment service. It's like, you know, we work with the company, like we're training creatives how to work remotely more effectively in like a healthy, like, format. And hey, company, you need creatives, like we're going to we're going to be a matchmaker, and we get paid to match you. Yeah, we're matching you with people that are trained as a creative to work with in a remote environment, and get creative projects through the door with, you know, multiple parties being remote. And so like you have a product that you sell the creatives, like, because you're teaching them how to operate and complete creative projects in this kind of remote environment. And then you get paid by organizations to match them with qualified trained creatives. Yeah. Again, it's two-sided marketplace, but like that's kind of combining the two people that you have. No, I love that. I think that's a really cool idea. God, and I could keep picking your brain forever. So we're getting to these closing couple minutes. Let's talk just a little bit. Where can people find out more about you, the services you offer? Maybe if you want to give a quick breakdown of the kind of work that you do, so if somebody wanted to engage, they would know what to do. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. I mean, first and foremost, if like you were digging anything I was saying or what we were talking about, I highly suggest you check out my YouTube channel. Hundreds of videos on all of these topics, on productizing, adding new revenue streams to your agency so that you're getting paid for your thinking and not just your labor. That's like what we talk about. If you're kind of an established or have existing clients and you're, you know, doing, you know, over 10K a month, you'd probably qualify for our foundations program. It's a 90-day program where we help you package up your expertise, put it onto a one-page visual roadmap that it's like your intellectual property. It's your proprietary process of getting your ideal client to their result. Automate your sales and onboarding process around selling that thing, and then how to go get 3 to 10 paying clients in the next 90 days. Like that's what we're focused on. It's like
simplifying the specialization of what it is you do, how to talk about it, how to go have, preliminary conversations and get people to give you money for that thing to validate it in 90 days. Then we would help you scale that up in our academy program. And we have agencies that are trying to completely transition out of done for you, some that are trying to, just streamline what it is they do, and our process can help with both. So if that sounds like you, just go to altagency.com. There's a link to schedule a call with us. But if you want to hear more about our methodology, I definitely recommend checking out YouTube.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll make sure to include all the links and everything in the show notes so people can get connected. I guess I can find you on LinkedIn and places like that if they have questions or concerns or would like to sort of maybe continue this conversation offline somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm very responsive in the YouTube comments, so you can hit me there. And then I'm super responsive on Facebook as well. So if you want to message me there.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate your time. And honestly, I had 100 other things. I figured it'd be a little bit more of a practical conversation, like a more pragmatic kind of talk. But I think we hit across a couple of really good things and spent the appropriate amount of time on them. So thanks so much.
Cool. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me. It was my pleasure. And thank you for the chance.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody who tuned in this week and every week. And we'll see you all next time.